Okay, I'm just going to run through that again. Sorry. Damn. Okay. Agency members in attendance would be Klaus Yonder, Peter Linderoth, Norma Curlin, Elliot Benton, Jay Schondorf. Staff members in attendance, Jen Urena, Robert Clausey, Doreen Carol Andrews, and Patricia Sesto. And if it's all right with you, Mr. Benton, I'll run through how the Zoom meeting works for our attendees.
Very good.
Okay, so the operation this evening, Mr. Benton will go through the agenda as provided online. When an application comes up that consultants are in the attendee side, you will be promoted to panelists so that you may speak with the agency members. Doreen will screen share maps that have been provided prior to this evening, and she will do her best to navigate her cursor around the map as the consultant directs. Attendees, you will be muted and able to see the agency members and the staff and the interaction between those people and the consultants. Applicants, Mr. Benton, at the end of the discussion with the agency and the applicant, will ask for public comment. At that time, you can raise your virtual hand and you will be given the opportunity to ask questions. This meeting is being recorded, and the full transcript and video will be available the next day or two online. If this evening, if there's any dialogue that is inappropriate and out of hand, you will be muted and removed from the meeting, and you don't get to come back in this evening, which has yet to happen to us, so I expect nothing different this evening. So I think that puts everybody in the same knowledge field, and I do request the agency members, if you can remain muted unless you have a question to ask, so that we can avoid any background noise that you might be unaware of.
Very good, thank you. Let's see, we have seating of alternates. Klaus and Peter, you are seated this evening. So we have the full 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of us. So we have a quorum. Has everybody had a chance to look at the draft minutes from the July 27th meeting? Do we have any comments, questions, modifications? Okay, can I have a motion to accept the minutes, please?
As a reminder, you can use your space bar to temporarily unmute yourself.
Jay Schondorf, motion to approve.
Second? I'll second it.
Thank you. Roll call. So roll call for approval of the minutes as submitted. Klaus Yonder?
Yes.
Norma Curlin?
Yes.
Elliot Benton?
Yes.
Jay Schondorf?
Yes.
And I don't see Peter Linderoth.
Yeah, I'm here. I have a quick question on that. I wasn't at the last meeting, so am I abstaining on this one?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. My attendance is usually spotless, but you know, I wasn't here last time.
Very good.
Yeah, I'll abstain. Thank you.
Okay.
May we have the director's report, please, in the monthly summary?
There is nothing substantive to report, except that we are moving along at, we continue to be on pace for a normal year application wise. So that's good news. And consultants report that they are quite busy. So it will likely be a busy fall for us.
Very good. Okay, then let's move on to the applications. The first, actually 42 Dublin Hill Drive. What happened to me? Oh, there we are. 42 Dublin Hill Drive, although listed under pending applications, is actually a public hearing.
It is not, because the public hearing closed at the last meeting.
Yeah.
So now it's an application that's ready for review. It's a pending application.
Okay.
We do have the consent approvals, I believe, before we get to pendings. Just
okay. If you want to do it that way, fine. Do we have any questions or comments on any of the 3 consent approvals? 12 Ledge Road, 27 Valley Road, or 305 Stanwich, 300 Stanwich Road? There being no questions, I move that we accept the consent approvals.
You need a second?
Norma.
Thank you, Norma. I'll run through. Klaus Yonder,
Yes.
thank you. Norma Curlin,
Yes.
Ellie Benton,
Yes,
Jay Shondorf,
Yes.
Peter Linderoth.
Yes.
Thank you.
okay, now we get to the pending applications, 42 Dublin Hill Drive. This is a closed public hearing.
Interrupt. Can I be moved up to, I need to be able to share
Yes.
the maps.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll do the same for you, Bob. Done that already. Okay, so the public hearing on this is closed. There is no further discussion with the applicant, consultants, or the public. This is wholly in the hands of the agency at this point, and the agency was pursuant to directives they received at the last, that staff received at the last meeting. The agency members received both an approval and a denial that Bob had in the packets last Thursday for your consideration.
Very good. Would you care to take us through the conditions for approval first?
I'll leave that in Bob's hands.
Very good.
Split our duties.
All right. Most of these conditions are standard for this type of a development. The real unusual condition is number 2, special condition number 2, talks about alterations to this development scheme that the applicant, in consultation with the director, well, let me put it this way. In consultation with the director, the applicant put forward these suggested alterations, which are itemized A through E on the special condition 2, also illustrated in the sketches that were pasted into the recommended or draft conditions of approval. The limits of disturbance around the pool complex in the western end of the development envelope have been tightened. The pool has been rotated 90 degrees, so that pulls it away from the offsite wetland to the west. There's it says revised limit of grading and lawn to the southeast of the driveway and motor court south of the garage, which is responsive to comments made by the agency last month about trees that members felt perhaps didn't need to be removed if this sort of an adjustment was made. So these itemized changes would be reflected on a final construction plan, would be reviewed by staff and confirmed to be compliant with the specifications in A through E. Other than that, number 3 would be in conjunction with this revision, we would need a revised wetland and buffer habitat plan. Other than that, these are all very standard conditions for a development on a currently vacant lot. I guess number 8 is another somewhat unusual condition in that because there's a driveway crossing here, and a lot of the times how these culvert crossings are installed and phased depends on which contractor is hired to do the job. So the recommendation here would be to have a site meeting between the contractor and wetland staff to go over how they propose to do this in a way that limits any impact to the wetland. Going down the list, the rest of these conditions are completely normal. That's about it for my summary, unless you have a question.
I do have a question. I'm a little confused, Bob. These are changes that were made after the hearings were closed?
No. So it was part of the directive to craft an approval, as it would seem from the agency's discussion last time that that the agency did not feel we were at the right place with the amount or the footprint of disturbance that the proposed development. So in an effort to get to a place that the agency might find acceptable, I met with the applicant and we talked about pushing things in all directions where I thought the agency had issues, and crafted a description of what condensing that footprint would be. So the again, you can definitely legitimately look at that as like an after the public hearing, if that so chose, or you can say, I understand where the staff comment on this or the recommendation was coming, and it in fact addresses the concerns that we had expressed during the hearing, so we're now satisfied.
I would look at this and say, wait a minute. This is after the hearing was closed, and I haven't had a chance to really consider it or look at it. So that's sort of unacceptable to me. I don't know, how do the rest of you feel? The rest of the agency?
This is Norma. I agree.
And so,
This is Peter. I'd agree too. Also, just looking at some other things, it looks like the application's incomplete for some other reasons as well.
okay, so I don't know how we can deal with this, Pat. This is not
Move
the
on to
last-
denial. So it's not unusual, so it is within our right, broadly speaking, it's within our right to approve things with conditions. So that aspect is fine. These conditions reflect what we as staff took away from the discussion from the agency members about the areas in which the development envelope was too generous or excessive or expansive.
right. And
To
had
your
you,
point, you can say those things are true, but I'm uncomfortable with the specifics. It's too detailed to craft into an approval. Or you can say, it actually does speak to the areas in which we, on the record, said were issues to us, and this resolves those issues.
be that as it may, these kinds of conversations should have been held before the hearing was closed. And I think this should have been brought before the agency, before the hearing was closed, and incorporated into the plans of the applicant. Myself.
That's why you have a denial to review as well.
Would you care to take us through the denial, please?
Sure. So the denial focuses on, first and foremost, that the changes that the agency had urged from the applicant all along with regards to alternatives were not forthcoming, and the final plan that was presented was only a 10% reduction in that disturbance envelope, and the agency was not comfortable with that and felt that there were feasible and prudent alternatives that would protect the buffer more thoroughly.
Okay, I need to stop you there. When
Yep.
you said the 10% reduction, is that the plan that you negotiated with?
No,
This is the plan that, the last plan we saw at the hearing.
that's correct.
Thank you.
The agency was provided with alternatives such as a conservation easement on the north end, a driveway that would have driveway configuration that would have circumvented the wetland, and those were later withdrawn by the applicant. What else was there? The incompleteness of the application as cited in the staff report. And so that the basic being that the agency cannot make the finding that no feasible prudent alternative with a lesser impact would exist.
Okay, you also have the mitigation plan.
Yep, the mitigation plan, again, it was incomplete because it does not relate to the most final plan, which that could have been handled in a special condition, but there's still disproportionate loss of mature trees for the site overall. And then there was not a discussion how the understory trees that are proposed to mitigate for that loss in canopy, how those two line up with each other, and then a tree save plan is needed. So we do not have loss that exceeds the boundary of disturbance.
Okay, and I'm assuming that the negotiation that you carried on with the applicant basically dealt with item number 5 here on your,
Can you, I can't link into the report while I'm
Okay.
on.
okay, your item number 5 said the applicant made numerous oral references to modifications and accommodations that could be incorporated into the application. At the final hearing, the applicant suggested changes discussed be made conditions of approval. And I'm assuming that your conditions of approval will fundamentally try to capture those conversations as outlined in item 5.
Correct.
Okay.
So effectively, we're saying the A through E of the draft approval is too much. It's out of line with the intent of a public hearing, and therefore the denial, which states that there's too much that needs to be changed and too much discussion that was not represented in the plans, is now grounds for denial.
Well, I would say the real problem I have is that the negotiation between staff and applicant cannot be reviewed by the agency and or the public, since this was a public hearing, prior to our making a finding.
So I was careful in that, I'm not sure if negotiation is the right word or not, but in meeting with the applicant, that I was representing the evidence that was in the record that the agency brought up as locations of problems, issues of problems. So then, can those issues of problems be represented as special conditions? And if the agency says, no, we're not comfortable with that, then you move on to the denial.
Okay. Does anybody else on the agency have comments, questions? Anybody want to raise their hands and talk?
What's the next step if we now deny this, now that the hearing is actually closed? What does the applicant have to do? Anything? Start new?
They are free to come because it's denied without prejudice. They're free to make application again. And then presumably at that point, they would come in with the plan that they discussed with me, and then the agency and the public have the opportunity to go through it in detail to say it meets our concerns or it doesn't meet our concerns. And then the dialogue, but so reapply is the short answer.
And can we waive the application fee if they chose to reapply?
You could, but I wouldn't do that personally. I would recommend against it because the applicant was given a lot of direction on how to make this work, what the issues of the agency were. And they had not only the regular days, they had a plus 90 days. And now we have to go back and do our work all over again. So, but in the end, it's the agency's decision. I'm just not a proponent of that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Jay?
I remember the discussions at the time of the closing, and frankly, I like what they're proposing in general in these A through E. But I'm not sure we have had any chance to fully explore the impact of all of them, so that I'm not happy with just approving on that basis.
Thank you. Norma?
Norma, you're muted.
I agree with Jay. I would, if it's appropriate now, make a motion to deny the application based upon the August 19th supplemental staff report from Bob Clausy.
Okay. Peter, do you have any comments?
I'm in agreement with that too. This seems like a lot.
Before we have further discussion,
I'm sorry?
we need a second before we have further discussion.
Well, I was trying to poll the whole agency before we had a motion.
Norma made a motion.
True. Okay, I'll second Norma's motion. Now, Peter,
I was going to say I'm in agreement too. This is a lot for special conditions of approval. And I think based on the denial conditions we've been provided as well, I think we're pretty fair in denying this one and asking them to start over with the input they've received in the process. And to remember that that was a lot of agency and staff time that had gone into that when we consider waiving fees or not. You know, as Pat said, we're gonna have to reopen and reassess this as they put a new plan forward.
okay. I concur with the overall direction that the agency has taken. So let's have we have a motion for denial. Can we call the roll?
Okay, Klaus Yonder,
Yes.
Norma Curlin,
Yes.
Elliot Benton,
Yes.
Jay Shondorf,
Yes,
Peter Linderoth.
Yes.
Okay, application is denied 500.
Thank you very much. A lot of paper went along with that application. Just give me a second here to get organized. Okay, 82 Buckfield Lane, Matthew McCullough for Michael Grunberg. Okay. Okay, Doreen?
Okay, so this application is to maintain an unauthorized pool fence located in a high-quality wetland. The 6-foot tall pool fence is currently located within standing water along the northwest property line and extends from the previously approved wood fence at the southeastern frontage of the property to the edge of the pond toward the rear of the property. As stated in the narrative, the metal fence posts are set into the ground with no concrete and will leave 3-inch holes at regular intervals for animal migration. Included with the staff report that was received in your packets is a letter from Bill Kenny dated July 27th, 2020, stating that the pool fence will have no adverse effects on the wetlands and watercourse. And an email dated July 21st, 2020 between Attorney John Harness and State Building Inspector Joseph Cassidy, stating that bodies of water could be considered a pool barrier provided the fence extends into the water a minimum of 18 inches and meets all the requirements of section 305.6 of the Connecticut State Building Code. Also provided in the packet is the agency's deer fencing policy that was adopted September 24th, 2004. Bill Kenny's letter mentions a similar pool fence approved at 570 Lake Avenue under permit 2019-25. The approved as-built plan was provided in the members' packets and shows the approved pool fence and the delineated wetlands that are on site. The soils report prepared by Bill Kenny, dated May 7th, 2018, is also provided and describes the wetlands on site, excluding Spartan Pond, as consisting of a lawned wetland and an intermittent watercourse. The pool fence that was installed it was not installed in standing water within a high quality wetland, but within a lower quality wetland. Point 1 of the letter states that the fence protects animals from predation and the adverse effects of residential activity. The fence more likely creates a barrier that prevents animals from easily accessing the stream. It limits habitat area, reduces food sources, and prevents escape. According to the homeowner, spring peepers can be heard in the swamp, and therefore the area also supports vernal species. Point 2 states that the fence does not separate animals from the pond and the adjacent high quality wetland. It does, however, only allow for animals to move in one direction, limiting their access to reaching the open water and may cause them to be more readily corralled by predators. Point 3 states that the fence protects wetland vegetation from deer browsing. However, deer can swim and would not be deterred from entering the property by way of the pond. The fence as it exists may impede natural flow, creating damming or blocking of water, resulting in flooding or erosion. The fence may also give the impression that the residential yard can be expanded, resulting in loss or degradation of the wetland overall. To comply with pool enclosure requirements of the building code, the bottom of the fence can be elevated no more than 2 inches off the ground. The property and the fence are located within flood zone A, and therefore the area floods and water then recedes during dry periods. The resulting changes in the ground topography, movement of rocks, logs, and other debris brings into question whether a code compliant pool fence, keeping a 2-inch gap below the fence, can be maintained during these fluctuations. A prudent and feasible alternative for the code compliant pool would be to locate it closer to the pool as indicated in permit 2014-64, with a separate deer fence set at the agency's standard 6 inches above grade through the wetland and buffer. Installation of a deer fence would cause less wetland impact and would also be less likely to obstruct water flow. A final note, the northern property line stockade fence was approved under a separate permit. It was conditioned to leave 6-inch gap along the base to allow for animal migration and water flow. This fence was not requested to be a pool fence at the time the permit application was submitted by the applicant and was not authorized as a pool fence. The application before the agency addresses the fence along the southwest property line only. Conditions of denial have been provided for the agency's consideration. The deadline should be changed to September rather than August. Also, the agency's standard conditions are suggested should the agency choose to approve the pool fence.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Harness has been promoted to panelist as well as Mr. Kenny. I don't believe if any other attendees are meant to be speaking on behalf of the applicant, please raise your hand. Okay, Mr. Grunberg. Okay, Mr. Grunberg has been promoted to a panelist as well. I think Mr. Harness is here on behalf of the applicant.
Yes, good evening. John Harness here for the applicant, Michael Grunberg. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you. On the call, hopefully with me, is Michael Grunberg, Bill Kenny. I think Matthew McCullough is trying to log in right now. I wanted to make sure that the letter that I had sent to you by FedEx on August 20th has made it into the record. I sent it both by email and by FedEx.
Yes, your cover letter with a report from Mr. Kenny and Dr. Danzer were forwarded to the agency members via email on Friday.
Okay, thank you. And as part of the letter dated August 20th, I think I had also included a copy of the FAQ section of the Inland Wetlands website, which states that when the requirement of the 6 inches below the wetlands fence is not consistent with the building code, that requirement is waived. And so I just wanted to make sure all the commission members were aware of that, because it seems like when we were talking about this last time, the view was that all Greenwich residents that have a wetlands pool fence are told to remove the 6-inch barrier at the bottom. And that wouldn't be consistent with what's posted on your website. So I just wanted to make sure everyone had that. You see the additional report from Stephen Danzer, which also, like Mr. Kenny's report, states that there's no adverse impact to wetlands. And, you know, based on those expert opinions, it's our position that we don't have to consider reasonable, prudent alternatives, because there's not been shown any adverse impact to wetlands. And so we would like the commission to grant our application to keep our fence on the easterly border, which is the subject of, on the westerly border, sorry, which is the subject of tonight's hearing. We'd like you to approve that. I'll let Bill Kenny, you know, chime in with his thoughts as well.
Good evening, this is Bill Kenny of William Kenny Associates in Fairfield, and just want to point out a couple things. There was the reference that I made to the project at 570 Lake Avenue, where there was what I believe a very similar situation that was approved. There is an area of lawn wetland, but as part of that project, there was a fairly decent sized area where we took the lawn wetland and planted it to enhance it. And we filled it with, we removed all the lawn and put in native ground cover, native shrubs and trees to enhance that habitat. And that area is cut off by the fence. So there's separation. Any animals within the pond can't get access to that area because of the fence. So in that way, it's very similar. And another thing I wanted to point out was that on the small watercourse that runs alongside the, on 82, I'm sorry, on 82 Buckfield. The watercourse itself has a low stone wall on either side of it. That watercourse, yes. And so that in itself prevents the movement of whether it be turtles or salamanders. It's an impediment to their movement. The wall extends out of the water in the watercourse about a foot, and it lines both sides of the watercourse in that area. So the fence is not, even if the fence were to be removed, that would still impede the movement of small amphibians or reptiles in the direction to the east towards the house. That's it. That's all I have to offer.
Okay. Doreen? Okay, Bob. You're mute.
I'd just like to make one comment. I haven't reviewed the Buckfield application, so I'm not, but I am familiar with the property. And I don't believe there's any mitigation offered by the applicant as part of this application to maintain this fence. I do know, because I did do the review of the application, that 570 Lake Avenue had an extensive mitigation plan. And driving by the site, it seems to be doing very well. So Areas of wetland at 82 Buckfield that are currently lawn. There's an opportunity there to mitigate.
Okay, thank you. Doreen, could I ask you a question, please? You say further the fence may impede natural flow. Is it may or will?
Oh, I think that it will. That area is in a flood zone, so it periodically floods and flows throughout that whole area. I think you've been to the site and you've seen the topography, the lay of the land.
I haven't been to the site.
You haven't, okay. So
No.
I believe that it will impact the flow of water. It does not cross the stream, so there's that heavier flow through the stream, but I think that there will be an impact overall in that area.
Okay, so there is definitely an impact to the wetland if it will impede the natural flow. That's your opinion?
Yes.
Now, the other thing is it says here for a pool fence, it says in the case where the pool or spa area abuts the edge of a lake. And based on the few drawings that I've seen, we don't seem to be abutting the edge of the lake, the pool area itself. So I'm a little confused as how it acts as a pool fence, but
It goes out into the pond.
no, I understand it goes out into the pond. The pond, however, does not abut the pool area.
So it's pool,
Right.
lawn, pond.
Right,
So
and the question is, what does abut mean? Abut to me means right there, not
I
with
would
the
agree with
lawn
you.
area.
Yep.
Okay, so that doesn't seem to qualify as a pool fence. But that's not our call.
No. So well, I do have a question for Mr. Kenny. If I don't interrupt you, Elliot, I'm not sure if you're done.
Go ahead.
In your assessment of the fence as it relates to the wetland, did you consider, I didn't see in your report the reference to the floodplain of the being in zone A and at what size storm the area actually floods?
I have not looked at that.
Okay. So with regards to the concern that Doreen has discussed, you would not have a response to that since you don't know when it actually floods. Is that correct?
I am not aware of it being within the flood zone. Right. I haven't studied it from that perspective. For flooding in general, I don't see it as a significant issue.
Well,
So I do want to be sure that for the agency this evening, the word significant, it has relevance if this were a public hearing that was being held on the basis that the agency identified when it received the application, the activity may have a significant impact, which then invokes section 10.3 in the decision-making process, that the agency would have the finding that there was likelihood of a significant impact, and then yes or no feasible and prudent impacts. We do not, that threshold does not pertain to this application. The agency does not have to find a significant impact. The agency needs to identify if there is any impact, and then they are able to pursue feasible and prudent alternatives, but they are not required to make the finding that no feasible and prudent alternative exists. So that would allow the agency to accept an alternative that has some impact, but on balance with other considerations, they find that level of impact acceptable. So I do want to be very clear that Mr. Danzer's report, is Dr. Danzer here this evening? I didn't see him in the attendees list. Okay, so I guess he can't respond. Um, His report focuses on what the definition of significant impact is and then runs through all the criteria. That is not a criteria that is relevant to this particular application. The agency only needs to be examining if an impact occurs or not, based on the record.
Would you talk, Pat, would you talk a little bit about what you mean when you're talking about the flood zones, what the probability of flooding is?
So Doreen correctly identified that the area where the fencing occurs is within the flood zone A. So that falls within the 100-year flood zone, or the preferred way to discuss that is that there's a 1% chance in any given year that this area will flood. And that's based on the FEMA modeling. What FEMA doesn't tell you, because they're doing that based on who needs insurance and who doesn't. So we know that there's a 1% chance in any given year this area will flood. What we don't know is there are 50% chance that this area will flood in a 2-year storm or in a 1-year storm event, which would be there's a 100% chance of this area flooding in any given year. So we know the extreme exists, but we don't know, as you slide along the scale to the more frequent storms, where we stop. Is it a 25-year storm, 10-year storm, 5-year storm? We don't know the frequency at which this area floods.
May I speak at some point, or do I have to be asked, or how does that work?
I'd say, Mr. Grunberg, if you choose to identify yourself and speak on your own behalf, that's fine. But
Thank
please identify yourself when you start.
Thank you very much. Michael Grunberg here. I just to add a little layperson's perspective on this, we're talking about a fence that connects to another fence that this agency approved 3 years ago in this area just before the yellow line. That fence, along with the fence on the other side of the property, were all approved by this committee. Thank you very much. That whole perimeter has been approved up until this yellow line that we're discussing today. All of this is in the same flood zone, the same wetlands, the same quality of wetlands and everything else. Again, correct me if I'm not wrong, what has changed? Why is this now a federal case instead of it just being what it was 3 years ago?
Well, I would respond to that by saying now it's into the pond. It wasn't into the pond before.
And the high quality portion of the wetland.
In the high quality portion of the wetland. Thank you. That
That's
is what has changed.
That's incorrect. The other end of the fence on the other side of the property does go into the pond, number one, albeit just one leg of it. A lot of this area goes underwater, as Doreen Carroll is saying, depending on the season and the flooding. And so, you know, the distinguishing aspect from the area, again, on the Clark side, on the westerly side, is literally splitting hairs at that juncture. You know, further out at the last 10 feet, let's say, or the last, 18 inches or whatever the amount is that's in the pond, I will say we don't know. But certainly the vast majority of the new part of the fence is no different than the rest, except it's porous and allows water to flow through it. And as two experts have said, does not cause any impact on the wetland or de minimis. And so, I just, for the life of me, Mr. Kenny is an expert. I don't know the man. I don't think I've ever met the man. I've never, he's no friend of mine. He's no enemy of mine either, but I've hired another expert and he says the same thing. With all due respect to staff, they're the same staff that had approved me to have a mesh put in on the other side of the fence as well, to go into the water. That was 3 months ago. So, you know, it seems to me that the qualifications of the individuals is at issue here. You know, Pat Sesto and Doreen Carroll said that I could have a mesh going into the water with holes every 16 feet. Now we're worried about the flooding. Well, that's the purpose of the mesh and the holes. And I've got now 2 experts that further say that even without the holes, without every 16 feet or 20 feet or whatever the amount was, would be fine. So,
except for the fact that they didn't take flooding into account. And when you do get flooding, you do get debris washing up against the fence and potentially creating a problem there.
So Mr. Benton, Ms. Sesto and Ms. Carroll didn't know what flooding was 3 months ago when they said, okay, to mesh going to the under the water.
I would have to let them speak for themselves.
We made a mistake. Doreen and I made a mistake on that. We were trying to make an accommodation. Subsequent to that, we've checked in with Dr. Clemens, who you all are familiar with, and I sent the copy of that email along. He says an 8-inch gap is appropriate for the issues that we're discussing here.
No, that's incorrect, Ms. Sesto. It's not the issues that are here, because he's never been to my property and he's never seen my fence and he's never been there. So please, you know, do not relate it to my property. It may be an issue you'd like to discuss at some point with the agency relating to pool fences, but we're talking about a deer fence, a fence that has been placed on this property, no different than any other, on any other wetland in any other part of this town. But here in this specific area, your expert has not visited. So whatever you're about to say about that, you know, missive email is of no consequence or point to my property.
Mr. Grunberg?
Yes.
Lower your voice, please.
I'm sorry if the volume's high.
It's the intensity.
So Dr. Clemens' email speaks for itself. It was a conceptual discussion, and that we apply principles to specific situations. So he didn't need to be at the site to determine what height a fence would need to pass wildlife. Doesn't need to see the site to know his answer to that.
Just one other question. How far into the pond does this actually, I can't tell from the drawings I'm looking, how far into the pond does it actually go?
It depends on the rainfall, and same like Doreen Carroll said, it depends on the weather. You know, if it's dry, it barely goes into the pond, and at all. It's not, as you can see from the survey, it's sort of like marsh area.
Okay.
There is no distinguishing factor as to where the pond begins and ends that I can see.
So the water level goes up and down. And based on my own experience, I know that deer are fairly good swimmers. So I'm wondering how you're looking at this as a pool fence when it's in an area that the deer can easily walk around it.
Well, the purpose of a pool fence is not to keep
sorry,
deer from swimming.
I meant deer fence.
But in fact, children.
No, I understand it. That's why you would have it close to the pool, not at the perimeter. But if it's a deer fence, which is what you said, doesn't seem to be stopping the deer because they can walk around it.
You may think so, but I can only tell you from experience, from having it there in place, we've had no incidences of deer coming onto the property since it's been placed.
And it was placed when?
Well, the perimeter plus that addition over the last 3 years.
If the pond elevation fluctuates, how does the state reconcile that with their expectation that the pool fence, the safety aspect of this fence, will be continuously in water so that water, in fact, is a qualified barrier?
Once again, Ms. Sesto, I have to ask that is a little moment for the IWWA to deal with. But to answer you anyway, I will say that the purpose of a pool barrier is to be a barrier against interlopers. It's not to be a foolproof ironclad resistance against those that want to do harm to themselves in my pool. And so the body of water that even at a dry moment, a dry time of the season, these fences still do that purpose and provide that purpose, because the pond is a water course and there's water there. And even if it's minimal, I think the code calls for 18 inches into water, and it can be cantilevered or otherwise. So I think that it meets it in all those respects.
Not sure if the state is aware of the fluctuating level of your pond.
Pat, on this one, I happen to concur with Mr. Grunberg.
Yep,
that
I agree. We're not going to go there.
No. All right. I'm actually prepared to make, does anybody else on the agency have a comment or a question?
Yeah, it's Jay Schoenhoff. I have one question. I'm looking at the drawing. I'm aware of the fence that we discussed months ago on, let's say, the top. I don't know what I guess it's on the east side. Then the fence comes all the way around to the driveway. Does the fence continue past the driveway?
Yes.
And so, and then it makes a left turn and continues how far?
It goes all the way around the entire perimeter of the property, either as a stone wall with a fence on top or with gates and so on, all the way around the entire perimeter of the property.
And we are discussing strictly this yellow piece.
That's
Correct.
correct. So the
And
agency,
the rest of the fence, is that considered a deer fence, a pool fence, or just a fence?
As far as the IWA should be concerned, it's just a fence.
correct. It's just a fence, and that's the agency, if you recall, overruled staff with the mesh at the bottom, and the agency has deemed that that mesh needs to be removed.
And Jay and Mr. Schoenberg,
Grunberg, please.
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished.
The permit specifically requires that 6-inch gap to be part of the fence that runs along the east side. Mr.
Michael?
Bennett.
Okay. And that decision was made without the ability for me or my attorneys to talk about, and it wasn't on the agenda as with notice and for public discussion, and therefore we've taken an administrative appeal of that decision, non-decision. You know, I'm not sure how Mr. Harness, Attorney Harness can discuss that if he wishes, but the removal of that 6-inch mesh that was told that we could put in, which we put in and made the holes, has not been removed. And so therefore, at this very moment as we speak, it actually qualifies as a pool fence. Now, the fact that Ms. Sestos has ordered us to remove it, we've appealed that.
No, the agency ordered its removal.
Fair enough.
And the holes within the mesh do not make it qualify as a pool fence.
That's for a court to decide, Ms. Carroll.
So this is John Harness jumping in here. I think we should be paying attention to the subject of tonight's application, which is the yellow highlighted area of the fence on the western boundary. And I think Mr. Grunberg made some good points, and one of those was that the fence that's before the commission tonight is not inconsistent with the previous approvals issued by the agency on the other fence or fences located on the property.
Okay, are there any other agency comments or questions?
Yeah, this is Peter Linderoth. We've been, throwing around pool and deer fence, but ultimately we're looking at a regulated area and something that would be permitted regardless of deer and pool, in my opinion. But could you zoom in a little bit and show me, what was it, permit 2014-064, wetland flag 7 through 13, where this was approved to go in relation to where it is now?
Yes. Okay, so in this location, here was the opening for the pool fence. It ran along the side of the wetland, right on the edge, right along here, and back to the house, enclosing the pool in this location.
Okay, thanks. That's actually helpful. It was the one on the right next to the other one. Yeah, I mean, we do have differing opinions between people. Some say impact, no impact, but it seems like that's a pretty good alternative to having it in a pond or right in the wetland where it is, in my opinion.
Peter, can you articulate that as it relates to wetland impact?
Well, it would seem that putting a fence in a pond or right smack along in the wetland where it was placed would have more of an impact than pulling it in tighter to the, the house and the disturbance that associated with the house. And pulling it in would, I'd like to hear from Mr. Kenny again on that point. I mean, it seems to me that the alternative here is to just pull it out of the pond, which it wasn't permitted to go into in the first place. And we do have differing opinions. So maybe he could speak to that one more time in respect to the wetland impacts.
Sure. And as the discussion has gone on, I've been doing a little research and thinking more about the flooding effects of surface water movement and the fence. But first, I think, just summarize again the points I was trying to make earlier was that due to the alignment of this fence, in that it's parallel with the primary water movement flow, and that's moving along the watercourse towards the pond, and the fence parallels that. So the primary water movement is parallel with the fence, and the primary movement of wildlife, as I was saying, there's other impediments moving towards the house, and in my opinion, prefer not to have the wildlife moving towards the house anyway. It's wide open lawn. They have less cover for hiding from predators and things like that. So if you're keeping them in the forest with great access to the pond, I think that's a good situation. Also the fence at 570 Lake, that fence is entirely within a flood zone as well, an AE flood zone. So they are very similar situations. And then lastly, the little bit of wetland that remains east of the fence, it does provide an opportunity then to plant that with more native plants, and that's protected from deer browse. And when you look at the wetlands on the west side of the fence, there's not a lot of shrub layer, and on the east side of the fence, you could fill that up with native shrubs, and they'd be protected from deer browse, and that improves habitat for other wildlife such as birds and insects.
So are you proposing this as mitigation?
Between the channel and the fence,
That would seem to be up to Mr. Grunberg.
correct.
I have no problems in where that hand is going in this area, from where the old fence was. If I may just address Mr. Linderoth, he asked a question relating to the prior pool fence. I thought he was relating to the fence near where the hand is now, that was approved 3 years ago. Yes, that fence right there at that point. And that also, to everyone's chagrin or surprise, also goes underwater as well. So when you ask about, and yet that was also approved last time around, and it also floods, no differently than the area at the very end. It just is more likely to be underwater more of the time at the end than at the beginning. So, but I'll answer the question. Yes, I'd be happy to add some mitigation from the, if someone could use that hand again, from the point of beginning till about there, about halfway to there. Come back a little bit and I'll explain why. No, come back towards right to there. This area from where the old fence was to that hand, that's where mitigation makes sense, because the rest is just so far away and it's just overgrown. You can't even get to it. So, but this area where the bank of the man-made stream, whatever that thing is that's there, with the stone on the sides, I'll be happy to add more mitigation there.
That's great, thank you. Are there any other comments from the agency? Do we have any public comment from attendees? Please raise your hand and Ms. Sesto will find you.
Not seeing any hands coming up.
Okay,
I will say that this application can go through the end of October. I'm not sure where anybody's thinking directionally, but if a mitigation plan is to be part of this application, I would like to see it submitted. I think lesson learned here, we're going to leave as little to staff as possible.
okay, well, with all due respect, Pat, I have complete confidence in the ability of staff to sit down.
Generally, yes.
So my own personal sense is to approve the defense where it is, given the mitigation. Any other comments from the agency?
Can I ask if, Doreen, who's most familiar with this area, if from a mitigation standpoint, the area that has been pointed out, does that, what do you
To my
think?
recollection, that area is standing water, so I would like to know, what would do well in that, and that would be up for Bill Kenny to provide. We would look for 80% survival, and we would use the planting guide that we use for restoration. So there would be a hold period for those plantings. And another condition would be, that was in the original, was to remove the mesh by a given deadline. That needs to be added to a condition.
But that's for the east side.
Right. No, well, for the north, it's northwest, I believe.
But not, so that doesn't involve the mesh, the staff call that was overturned.
So that was going to be, well, we did ask for it to be removed as part of a violation, but then we had added it into the conditions of denial. So if we do an approval, we would need to add it into conditions of approval.
If I may, we've taken an appeal of that, so I don't think I can, I think that's going to be decided by others.
So I would urge, I agree with Mr. Grunberg that this should, the fence where the agency overturned the staff field call should be left separate, since we do have a court action, and so I agree with Mr. Grunberg on that. I understand, Doreen, your desire to sort of clean up some loose ends, but this, I think, is a peculiar case.
Okay, can I have a motion from somebody in the agency, please? Well,
It's Jay. I'll give you a motion to approve with the addition of mitigation to be determined in consultation with staff.
And that's what the conditions set forth
And the conditions set forth.
by staff previously.
Well, the conditions that are attached to the application require the removal of the fence, so that's not going to happen.
Right, accepting that one per the discussion.
So 1 and 2. No, we're just going to leave the fence where it sits,
Yes,
right? So there are no special conditions, are there? There are no conditions at all.
Mitigation.
I'm
Should we
sorry.
have a deadline for the plan and a deadline for the planting installation and a period to hold the plantings and a bond?
Yeah, we only need those conditions.
Yeah, those are 3 fairly standard conditions, yes. Anything else, Doreen?
Contractors compliance, which is standard as well. An invoice for the planting cost, those standard inspection for planting plans.
So the standard specials.
Yeah.
And then the standard general.
Are you comfortable with that, Mr. Grunberg?
I presume so. I don't know what the standard specials and the standard generals and the standard corporals are. I have no
Leave them
idea.
all in your previous permit.
I've complied with all of them and have posted bonds and received my bonds back.
Good, then you were standard specials down.
I can live with everything that's been done so far except for the most recent stuff. So I'm good.
Which you're taking under separate action.
Correct.
Okay. Does everybody on the agency concur with this action?
We do need a second on this.
Well,
I'll
we're not
second
making,
Peter Linderoth.
okay,
Now I'll do the roll call.
please.
Okay, Klaus Yonder,
yes, approve.
Jay Shondorf,
Yes.
Elliot Benton,
Yes,
Norma Curlin,
Yes.
Peter Linderoth.
Yes.
Okay, passes 500.
and on we go. 2020-079-27 Edel Lane. Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors for Luigi Ruggiano for construction of a single-family residence, deck and retaining walls 14 feet from wetlands.
Bob Clossy with the staff report. This redevelopment will yield a slight reduction in impervious coverage. The current driveway goes by the west side of the house, and then there's a big motor court in the back. So when you do the addition and subtraction, it does come out to be a very slight reduction. So the applicant has submitted this as a conditional residential teardown exemption to the drainage manual, but has provided calculations that show peak runoff rates and volumes will be either unchanged or slightly reduced through the 100-year storm. Let's see. There is one drainage structure proposed, but that's for the basement sump pump discharge. So that's in the front yard. And the only issue that in reviewing this came up was the proposed grading in the backyard and the potential impact to the line of hemlocks along the northern property line. In bringing this to the applicant's attention, their engineer said that the fill can be pulled back, so it's a minimum of 10 feet from the hemlocks. And these are not, massive, large hemlocks. They're fairly modest diameter trees. So I think that will be a good thing and help protect the trees. Only other proposal or recommendation is that a 5-foot wide planted bed be maintained along the northern property line. This will create a 5 to 15 foot wide buffer to the offsite brook. Conditions of approval are listed in the staff report, and I recommend the agency issue a permit.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the agency? Any questions or comments from the public?
I did not see anybody raise their hand to identify themselves to represent the applicant. Oh, here is a hand now.
Okay,
Bob Zmarlak. Bob, you have been promoted to panelist. You're free to speak. Bob, if you wish to say anything, you need to unmute.
Yeah, Robert Zmarlak with Soundview Engineers. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we're in agreement with all the conditions that Bob has set forth in his recommendations. So we're fine with everything.
If any other attendees wish to speak, please raise your hand. Getting nothing, Elliot.
okay. I make a motion to approve. Can I have a second, please?
Norma seconds.
Thank you. Roll call. Norma Curlin,
Yes.
Klaus Yonder,
Yes,
Elliot Benton,
Yes,
Jay Shondorf,
Yes,
Peter Linderoth.
Yes.
Okay, passes 500.
2020-084, 225 Stanwich Road, Crossland Engineering PLLC for Colleen and Philip Hempelman for corrective action and wetland restoration for unapproved fill.
So the applicant asked for a delay to the next meeting on this application.
I think we can do that. We don't need a motion for that, do we? No.
No, we do not.
Okay. (2020-087) 200 Stanwich Road, Mueller Engineering LLC for 200 Stanwich Road LLC for corrective action for unpermitted repair and replacement of stormwater drainage pipes within wetlands. Doreen?
All right, the applicant is proposing to maintain an unauthorized replacement of existing drainage pipes that transferred water from the driveway catch basin along the northern property line to the wetland and watercourse area that's approximately 285 feet to the west. A stone riprap outlet of the drainage pipe is shown within the wetland area. Two previously existing 4-inch PVC pipes, which connected to one 8-inch PVC stormwater pipe from the driveway catch basin, became clogged and failed over time, resulting in significant erosion to the wetland and watercourse and buffer areas. To correct the issue, a new 8-inch PVC pipe was installed and connected to a level spreader about 100 feet from the wetland. The level spreader then connects to an 8-inch perforated pipe that was installed in a gravel trench surrounded by filter fabric. This pipe discharges to the riprap apron located within the wetland. As indicated by the project engineer, the bottom of the level spreader is flat and provides some infiltration, but the main function of the level spreader is to filter runoff and remove the pollutants through the gravel. The perforated pipe within the gravel trench acts as a secondary filter for further removal of total suspended solids and performs similar to a grass swale just below grade. The TSS removal rate is approximately 80%, which is the same as the Coltec system. The groundwater elevation is more than a foot below the bottom of the trench, and the soils are rated as sandy loam, which is good for the infiltration rate. The pre-existing 4-inch PVC drainage pipe are proposed to be removed or abandoned in place. The applicant should explain if abandoning the pipes has the potential to create erosion down the road. If it's determined that the failed pipe should be removed, erosion control should be installed before the project begins, and the pipe should be removed by hand, not using any heavy machinery. The riprap apron And the drainage pipe should be pulled back from the wetland and a mitigation planting plan installed at the end to filter any runoff. It's recommended that an order be issued with the conditions that are provided in the report.
Very well. Do we have anybody from Miller Engineering?
Raise your hand if you would. Let's see.
Brian here?
Brian is here. Brian, you've been promoted to panelist. You need to unmute yourself and you can speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm Alyssa today.
you're Alyssa every week. Every month.
You're right. Well, she's the boss, so you know. We had no problems with any of the conditions that. The only thing that we, the applicant and I, aren't really 100% keen on is the establishing of a planting plan to restore and mitigate the disturbed area. Consisting of 3 to 5 native shrubs, 3 to 4 feet in height, and 1 native shade tree or understory tree, 7 to 8 feet in height. We're not opposed to planting a little bit along the stream area there. The area where they decided to extend the pipe to, there was already an opening in that, I guess you could say, small brush area. There is mild, I don't know if anyone's been to the property, but there is mild brush along the whole edge of the water area there. And there is a little bit of an opening where the contractor, which this has already been done, this design has already all been installed. That was part of the violation. And we have no problem pulling it out, pulling that back, cutting the pipe if the pipe does extend that far. I'm not sure the pipe does extend into the actual wetland, but we're planning on having the wetland buffer staked out so we can get, or the wetland area staked out rather, so we can get the exact line and make sure we pull it out far enough to allow the water to at least seep over land a little bit before it travels into the stream, which will also provide more water quality for the driveway runoff. So we're not opposed to doing some plantings, some shrubs along the edge there where we disturb when we pull out the riprap apron, but we don't really want to have to plant a tree if we don't have to. And we have no problem removing the existing 4-inch PVCs there. They're the black corrugated pipe from Home Depot. I told them actually to leave that there after I was called that there was a violation, because I wanted to make sure that if the agency wanted to come visit the property, they could see, because those pipes were a very obvious indicator of the erosion and the amount of water that flowed through them. And over the years, the owner was constantly trying to just put Band-Aids on it. And finally, he did this without, you know, the proper channels being taken after we had one heavy rain in the spring. So, and since then, since we had our heavy rain about a week ago, I think we got a good inch within about an hour. That system has functioned great. He said there was no erosion. There was very little runoff coming out of the end of the pipe as well. So that means that there was infiltration provided in that level spreader that is perpendicular to a slope, but as well as in that curtain drain where the pipe flows towards the wetland area. So we're okay with all the conditions. We plant some shrubs along that, in that wetland area when we pull out the riprap. We just don't really want to have to plant a tree.
Yeah, so Brian, the condition was either or, so preferably the shrubs are preferred. So that sounds great.
Yeah, I think I personally prefer the shrubs. There's a lot of trees along the property line there on the other side of the stone wall that give that area some shade. So I didn't really see the need. I felt like a tree was just kind of almost be a waste a little bit.
I'm sorry, Carol, during the special condition actually says 5 native shrubs, comma, 1 native shade tree or 1 understory tree. So
I guess they should say or in between each. So that's my error.
Typo.
Okay. And the second thing is special condition 1, not later than September 7th, a revised plan will be provided. That gives you 2 weeks.
In regard to a revised plan, what exactly do you want to see on the revised plan? Some shrubs planted there and the pipe pulled back? Or, I mean, the pipe's installed, so it's really more of actually taking it out in the field.
Doreen?
So you can add in the plantings with the appropriate sizes onto the plan, locate them.
Okay.
And make an indication of that the pipes will be removed and where the erosion controls will be installed on the plan.
Okay.
And
Okay.
where the riprap will be pulled back to for the outlet.
Okay. Yep. Yep. That's not a problem.
Okay. Do we have any public comment?
I don't see any hands being raised.
Okay, can I have a motion, please?
It's a motion to issue the order with the special conditions as recommended, including the planting plan and figuring out how far back to pull the pipe.
Second from Norma.
Thank you. Okay, roll call. Peter Linderos,
Yes.
Elliot Benton,
Yes.
Norma Curlin,
Yes.
Dave Shondorf,
Yes.
Klaus Yander.
Yes,
Thank you. Passes 500.
Okay, 2020-088, 50 Husted
Brian.
Lane.
Thank you, Brian.
Gabriela Baumetz de Isman for installation of pool deer fencing 5 feet from wetlands.
Bob
Okay.
Colossi with the staff report. This is another combination pool deer fence. It is not in the wetland. It's at its closest about 5 feet from the wetlands. A good portion of the distance of this fence, which is around the north and west sides of the backyard, linking into the what would be the remainder of the existing pool fence, is currently lawn or mossy area under trees. It's not, you know, pristine wetland buffer. The western portion of the fence will be going through herbaceous material, as stated in the application narrative, basically kind of behind the row of the trees that are on the edge of the backyard. And so no woody vegetation will need to be removed for installation of this western portion of the fence. We do need the wetland flags along the west side of the property to be reestablished, just to make sure that both the installer and staff know where the wetlands are, so that we get this fence in the right place from the beginning. And there is a little deposit of leaves sort of near the northeast, what would be the northwest corner of the fence, that's in the wetland that needs to be removed. So I've got conditions of recommended approval that reflect all these comments, and I recommend the agency issue a permit for this.
Talk to me about the gap at the bottom.
The gap.
Does it need a gap at the bottom? The 6-inch gap, the infinite
No.
6-inch gap?
Not in my opinion, no. It could have up to a 2-inch gap and still be a pool fence, as I understand it.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions from the agency? Do we have anybody representing the applicant?
Here I am.
Very good.
Gabby has been promoted to panelist. Gabby, you're free to speak. Gabby, you're muted, so if you wish to speak, you'll need to unmute.
Okay, yes, thank you very much. Now I'm here. So we are planning to, or we would like to remove part of the pool fence and put instead part of deer fence and a part with the same, using the same pool fence that we have now. There's no interference with the wetlands because we are not going into the wetlands. So I don't think there's like any interference, as I said, with that. I mean, Animals can go through, water can go behind, even if there's very, very little water because it's just a stream. So that's it.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the agency? Any questions or comments from the public? Okay, can I have a motion, please? Klaus?
Approve with the normal conditions.
Norma seconds.
Okay, roll call. Klaus Yonder,
Yes, approve.
Peter Linderoth,
Yes.
Elliot Benton,
Yes.
Jay Shondorf,
Yes.
Norma Curlin. 500 passes.
Very good. 2020-090, 37 Baldwin Farms North, Rocco V. DeAndrea for precise construction contracting for corrective action for unauthorized retaining wall 40 feet from a wetland.
Okay, Bob Clossy with the staff report. I guess Doreen probably doesn't have the highlighted plan that I sent with your staff report, but I'll just go through this and try to, please refer to what you have in your packets along with what Doreen has on the screen. The application was made to maintain the walls that have been built on the property and extend a portion of this north is to the left on the plan. So extend a portion of the northern retaining wall. I take it back. North is up on the plan. So the western retaining wall. So that it ties into the eastern retaining wall. That portion of the application proposal has been eliminated by the applicant. So because the area below the eastern retaining wall, the retaining wall closest to the house is planted and it's stable. So there's really no need to disturb that area with construction of a wall extension. On the highlighted plans that I sent, I wanted to make the point that there are the green highlighted walls were approved as part of the 2019 order to correct. They were constructed as approved. The pink line, which on this plan is the eastern retaining wall below the, nope, Doreen, go to the left, that one, yep. Just to the west of the highlighted area, that whole section was built, and that was supposed to be relocated to the blue line on the highlighted plan I sent you, which is that wall that Doreen now has the hand on. That obviously was not done. The applicant would like to maintain what they have. They propose to plant up the highlighted area, which would which would complete the planting plan that was part of the order. And this area is also highlighted or circled in yellow on the plan that I sent with your staff report. So the completion of the planting plan, I think, is obvious. They really should be doing it. The question is, do they have to move that section of wall that's highlighted in pink to the location that was shown in blue? And I want to make the point, as noted in bullet point 2, that when the agency made the motion to issue the order to correct in 2019, on the record, it was moved that and approved that the wall be moved. That condition or it didn't get into the order, but it was on the record. It was very clear, and the applicant has submitted this application with the basically acknowledging that they know they're supposed to do it, but they don't want to do it. So I have provided conditions of approval of an order that contain both a draft condition to require the relocation of the wall, or 4B is just draft condition to complete the planting plan by a deadline. So if the agency wants to go back to and require this work to be completed as required in 2019, you would select condition 4A. If you think the wall can be maintained where it is and just complete the planting, it would be 4B. Mr. DeAndrea sent a supplemental letter on August 18th stating some reasons that he feels it's prudent to maintain the wall as it is, including that the site is currently stable, that there is a, right where Doreen's hand is right now on, there's a circle just right there. That's an 11-foot deep manhole where all of the drains from the structures to the east converge. And Mr. DeAndrea speaks about the issues with moving the wall, and you'd have to do grading, excavation and grading and stabilization around this manhole structure. So that's another thing that he says is a reason not to, mess up what's already there. And let's see, and making a stable transition and drop in elevation by moving this wall is also stated to be an issue. Mr. DeAndrea, I see, is among the attendees, and I may have missed something, and I would encourage him to speak to the agency on his points. But I do recommend an order to complete the work on this site be issued either with moving the wall as a condition or allowing the wall to be maintained, but completing the planting plan.
Okay, Mr. DeAndrea, do you have comments?
Thank you.
And I should note that Mr. Hagney has also been promoted to panelist on behalf of the applicant.
I think that Tom would just like to say a couple of words just as an introduction, and then I will respond to the issues contained in my letter dated August 18th, which I think would be the best way to proceed this evening.
Right. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, agency members. For the record, Tom Hegney on behalf of the applicant. When I was looking at this for this evening's meeting, I realized that at the closest point of the what is the easterly retaining wall, or the one on the right, it's 41 feet from the wetland boundary. At the point where it diverges from the wall as initially permitted and where it's actually bending closer to the wetlands, it's 46 feet away. When you go a little bit farther to the south, it widens to 65 feet and then 76 feet from the wetland boundary. And what we had approved as the westerly wall, that wall on the left-hand side or closer to the wetlands, ranges from 43 feet to 57 feet. And this wall is a substantially farther away distance from the wetland boundary than what has been constructed previously. For those of you who have seen it, this is a very substantial wall. There's a good deal of fill. As Mr. Corsi mentioned, there is a substantial drainage structure that most of the drains from the house feed into. and did previous to the renovation and activity on the site. With Mr. Kenny's planting plan and with the addition of what Bob had recommended of putting demarcation boulders along the easterly border of the landscaping that we're proposing, you end up with something that has a significant protection of the wetlands. Your lawn area is in this area 100 feet or more from the wetland, and you have it well planted with a significant amount of shrubs and trees to absorb anything that's coming off the lawn to the west. The wall itself is, as I said, very stable, and we think that removing it would cause more disruption to the site and more potential impact to the wetlands than having it remain and providing the plantings that Mr. Kenny's landscape plan provides, and with the protection that staff is asking for, which is the demarcation of boulders. In your choices, we would ask that you choose 4B, which would allow us to keep this wall where it is and proceed with the planting as outlined on our proposal. Tony?
Yes, thank you, Tom.
If I could ask Mr. Hegney a question, please.
Of course.
Mr. Hegney, how did the wall come to be constructed where it was instead of where it was supposed to be?
Sort of depends on who you ask. When I speak with the excavator, he believes that it was installed where it was staked. Mr. DeAndrea has checked with his field crews, and that does not seem to have been the case. As I said, it depends on who you ask as to how it got where it is.
Can I ask to follow up on that? When was it first discovered that the wall was in the wrong place? That was prior to 2019, correct? The site was still under construction?
No, Tony, do you recall?
I do not recall when it first became apparent to the agency members that it was in the wrong spot. We did not monitor that aspect of it during construction. This was an addition to an existing dwelling and the construction of a new septic system. So the site work that was being proposed was done without a great deal of supervision because the activities were concentrated on the house. After the septic system was constructed, which was a critical element of the design, which was supervised by us, we were not on site on a regular basis.
Doreen, do you recall when the violation was first noted?
Unfortunately, I don't. It's been a while since I've looked at that. Beyond.
Well, Bob sounds like, looks like. So my question is, was the site still under construction, or was it in the condition it's in now?
In my opinion, I believe that it became apparent during the presentation of the as-built conditions for the septic system.
So, Bob?
Well, and I'd also say that the 2019, between the issuance of the permit in 2018 to install the septic system, retaining wall and fill, and the addition was actually, I think it was more than 100 feet from the wetland. So that was sort of driving the septic issue, so we got involved. Between that point and 2019, early 2019, when that whole knob to the south of the house was shaved of trees, grading went down almost to the wetland. So that's why the agency in the order in 2019 authorized those two retaining walls at the southern part that are highlighted in green on your plan. And, you know, so it was in that whole discombobulation.
Okay, so long before the site was stable, the wall became an issue and that rolled right into the fact that the knob was regraded so that this sort of just sounds like a flow of issues all came about. Then I
Right.
have another question then, Tom, what's different between now and when the agency last issued the order to have the wall removed? If memory serves me, we had this manhole discussion. We had the discussion about the plantings and the demarcation. It wasn't done. So what's different now?
Oh, well, I don't think we had included the demarcation. I don't think we had included the landscaping to quite the same extent that we have that's shown on this particular plan. Also, what we realized is that the site is stabilized very well. And
Work has been done back in 2009. Is this a function of, I'm sorry, I don't mean to talk over it. Sometimes it's a little difficult on the Zoom. My apologies.
that the wall where it is the funny part would be it's farther away from the wetland than any of the other walls that are permitted on the site. In looking at the benefit and the impact and reviewing it further, it was our opinion, and Mr. DeAndrea can address this, that it is better for the overall site and the impact to the wetlands to keep this wall where it is and to provide the very extensive landscaping that we're proposing.
Thank you.
So if I may, I can follow up on some of those comments that Tom started. First, I would like to just note that our current client is the applicant, which is Precise Construction. We also represent, for a variety of reasons, the current owners of the property, which are Andrew and Jenna Weinberg. They are a young family. They do have young children. They were not involved in any aspect of the construction of the dwelling before they purchased it. So they're innocent bystanders, and I want to emphasize that. The proposal that we have right now, as Tom pointed out, is to maintain the violating wall in its current location, primarily because it is stable and it's providing the separation that the agency wants, and was evidenced by their acceptance of the wall location presented by William Kenny Associates as part of the restoration plan that the agency approved. That wall has an elevation at the top of approximately 84. The elevation of the ground on the eastern side of the offending wall is in the vicinity of 92 to 93. To remove that wall and reestablish some kind of a grade at a lower elevation, a practical consideration would show that it could not or would not go down below elevation 85. The function that would be provided if that wall were to be relocated would be a filtration effect through the meadow that would be planted, meadow or other dense shrubbery, which is evidenced in the planting that's currently located between the two walls that the agency approved as part of the restoration under the order that was issued in 2019-02. The photos that I provided with the application for maintaining the wall where it exists shows the very stable conditions in between and around and above the two walls. To remove the wall and relocate it at that originally considered location with a drop in elevation from around 92 down to an elevation of around 84 would require the removal of approximately 850 cubic yards of material. That's computed on the basis of showing the 3,300 square feet of lawn that would be removed, assuming that the original retaining wall would have been reconstructed as highlighted on our current construction plan. That would be a resultant of 850 cubic yards. Obviously, that would create a tremendous amount of disruption. It would create an unsafe condition between the top of that relocated wall and the bottom, which is currently the top of the westernmost wall that the agency accepted as compensation or appropriate restoration for the unauthorized filling. Tom touched on the fact that the contractor discovered the location of all the footing drains from the original house, and he determined on his own that that was the appropriate location to reconstruct that junction. I want to repeat that the primary activities on this house after the initial permit were concentrated on the interior renovation and a small addition to the northeast and southeast corners of the building on the, what I would call the front side or street side of the building. Therefore, we had very little activity or reasons to be active on this site. So I can't verify all the conditions that Mr. Carroll has represented during his construction. But most important, I think that we have a very stable site. We can enhance the function of the restoration that the agency approved, which included 2 walls westerly from the location of the existing offending wall. The planting plan that we propose is extensive. It would remove 3,300 square feet of lawn, and along with it, any fertilizer and pesticides that would be anticipated to be applied. We don't condone the violation by any means, but in this particular case, considering that the current owner had nothing to do with it, that the site is stable, that to remove the wall would create an unsafe condition, and consider also the amount of disruption and the need to remove that 850 yards to some other location off-site. For those reasons, we would ask the agency to consider that in this case, maintaining the wall where it is and planting an extensive area of shrubbery and vegetation would provide more benefit to the protection of the wetland.
Okay. Do we have an idea of why the agency chose in 2019 to require removal of the wall?
Maureen, a question for me or the agency?
No, it's a question for the agency staff.
I'll just give you my thought, and Doreen may have more details. But I think because the site was still somewhat under construction, that the agency thought, well, I mean, it's not like it is today, for instance, that, you know, completely stable. So just why don't you go do what you were supposed to do? And Doreen may have some further insight on that.
That sounds about right. I don't have anything more to add.
And my recollection was that there was no compelling reason not to have the site brought into conformance with the original proposal. And my recollection is the same sort of planting plan was offered and rejected by the agency. And the issue about the drainage was raised and rejected by the agency. And given the egregious violation by the developer to begin with, it just seemed appropriate to bring the site into conformance. And I will say part of the reasoning that I recall about not accepting the planting plan back in 2019 was, as we have seen over time, planting plans come and sometimes they go. Bringing the plan into conformance with the original approval would provide a much greater assurance that the area below the fence or below the wall would in fact stay in its appropriate naturalized vegetation. People want, it makes sense for lawn to go up to a wall or up to a fence. Even with boulders, we've seen situations like this where the buffer did not stand the test of time. Those are my recollections.
I know there may be a tendency in these kinds of situations when a contractor appears or seems to have blatantly ignored it. But in this particular case, because of the potential adverse impact on not only the family that resides there now and had nothing to do with this situation, and the issues of safety that would result from having another 8-foot drop close to the home, and recognizing how significant a benefit it would be to do the planting, albeit at a higher elevation, I think it would be appropriate in this case for the agency to consider that in this one case, the wall should remain where it is due to its stability, and recognize the benefits that will be in this situation by retaining the elevation where it is and removing the lawn and planting it.
Tony, how many square feet of lawn would be removed if the wall were put where it's supposed to be?
3,300 square feet by my
So we're not
calculation.
gaining,
me?
regardless of which 4A or 4B, there's
Yes.
still 3,300 square feet of lawn being removed.
The shaded area that I have with a cross hatching of dots, that area is 3,300 square feet.
Okay, so we don't gain anything by having the wall stay where it is versus having it move.
No, you definitely gain significantly, in my opinion, because you eliminate the significant amount of disruption that would occur.
That's not my question.
That has a short-term but significant impact.
Tony, I'm just trying to decipher when you're saying that 3,300 square feet of lawn will be removed under your preferred plan. I wanted to understand how that compared in square footage to what was approved or what was ordered in 2019. That's all.
Tony, when
It
I
would
looked
be
at the
equivalent.
plan, I thought that this plan with the shading is greater than where the wall would be located because it extends farther to the east and also to the south than the wall itself does.
And that would total up by my estimation right here. That's an additional about 50 by about 12. So it's about 600 square feet additional if the wall, over and above what the wall would have allowed. So there's a benefit, yes.
I'm sorry. Why didn't the wall get moved after the order in 2019?
Why did it not?
Yeah.
I can't speak to that. I did not control the contractor, nor was I involved in the daily operations of that.
Tom, do you know?
I don't, Pat.
I will say one more thing. The walls that were installed as part of the restoration under the order, those walls were staked by our firm and very clearly done with offsets to guide the contractor. And as you can see, they fall exactly where they were approved on the Bill Kenny plan. Our office did not stake the location of the wall where it is now, but you can see that the contractor most likely followed the contour of the land at that time. And that lines up with the wall, which I recall very distinctly telling the agency at the time that I needed that wall in that location below the septic system to provide for the runout of the effluent and make sure that it was clean before it got down to the wetlands. So that part was obviously right on the money because we laid out the septic system and the wall in that vicinity. And those are all consistent with the approved plan. As you move south of the septic system, you'll see the variation.
I just want to be clear. Are you saying the wall as approved in the original permit would conflict with the leaching field?
It does not conflict. No, I said it was significant to be there so that I could provide the select material down gradient.
Okay.
If you remember, if you do remember, the septic system in this particular lot was down basically in the wetlands. So it had to be relocated. We found a seam of gravel over in that northwest corner behind the house. And that was quite adamant that that was the only septic system location on the site, and it is. And it had to be protected with that additional travel time to the west.
So if I can just summarize here, the only difference between now and 2019 is the site's more stable.
Yes, that's correct. It is
Okay.
it is stable, yes.
So because an order wasn't followed for the applicant seeking relief.
But also the area for restoration plantings, as shown on Mr. DeAndrea's plan here, has been increased to the east and to the south. And as I pointed out earlier, in the area where the wall is offending is closer to the wetland, it's 65 to 75 feet away. And that's something that oftentimes the agency finds acceptable, and of course did for the southerly portion of the walls, which is 45 to 55 feet away. And to now go in and disrupt this site for what we really don't believe is any significant benefit doesn't seem to make sense to us, which brings us back to presenting this to you this evening.
Are there any agency questions or comments? Nobody? Okay, any public questions or comments?
Not seeing any hands.
Well, I always hate to be in a situation where it's forgiveness versus permission and being presented with a fait accompli.
Twice.
Do we have any idea who the developer was, Tom? Mr. Hickey?
As Mr. DeAndrea indicated, it's Precise Construction.
Precise Construction. Well, they're the contractor, but who was the developer?
They did both contracting on site and were the developer of this particular renovation of the existing house.
And the Weinbergs play into this house? Have they moved into the house?
No, the Weinbergs bought the house as it was completed.
Right. Have they moved in?
Yes, yes, they have.
And was the order issued prior to them moving in? I feel like it wasn't.
I can't tell you. I don't know. I was not involved in the actual real estate transaction.
It's on the tax card. Shows that the Weinbergs purchased the house in July of 2019.
And the order to correct preceded that purchase, correct? Then I think that's the timeline then. So they
Right.
should have been,
The order was April of 19.
okay, so they were aware of the order when they purchased the house.
Right, but remember that the order didn't contain, this is the one where the order didn't contain the regulation? Not included in the written order?
That's correct.
So any attorney who did the search on this would not have seen that?
Generally, they just note that an order exists. They don't, the title searchers don't get into the details.
Right.
Well, but I'll make a point on that. I mean, if the order had specified that the wall had to be moved, and sometimes attorneys or even title search folks will contact staff directly and say, is this site in compliance with the order? I mean, is it moving in the right direction? Then we would have flagged it for them.
So unfortunately, we have a situation here that even with the best intent, they would not have known that the wall had to be moved. The purchasers.
Maybe,
And-
no.
Yeah, and if the staff person that the title searcher, for instance, caught that day wasn't intimately involved in the review of this, they wouldn't know either.
So why is it that we've got Precise Construction as the applicant as opposed to the Weinbergs?
The Weinbergs are as the owner. Precise is the one that had done the work and are obligated to make any changes if you, so.
So Precise Construction, I mean, to the issue of the defective language in the order, did Precise, I would think that it would have been Precise's Construction's obligation to let the purchasers know that this wall has to be moved as per the directive of the agency.
Well, but Mr. DeAndrea and I have been involved in talking with staff about this, and the contractor of Precise Construction it has to deal with this. So in talking about how this gets submitted, Tony and I discussed who should be the applicant, and rather than having the Weinbergs as the applicant, we had Precise Construction, and obviously the Weinbergs have to be listed because they're the owners of the property now.
And did this application have a triple filing fee?
Yes, it did.
So Precise Construction paid that?
Yes, they did.
Okay. Have any public comment on this? No public comment? Well, as I said, I hate to be in the permission versus forgiveness, but it looks like we have a rather unusual situation here. And personally, I'd go with 4B. What's the sense of the rest of the agency?
It's Norma, I agree.
Yeah, hi, this is Peter. Lindroth, I agree. It is a really extensive planting plan that's being provided in addition to what was already in place, which is great. It looks like, or just from what I heard, also it's the same amount of lawn that's being converted back to wetland regardless of what we do with this wall. I think it's really important though, to Pat's point, that the demarcation features be really prominent and not just get lost. And then that lawn eventually reverts back to lawn, what's becoming wetland. So what do we have, boulder demarcations in there?
Yeah, I'd opt for something like detached sections of stone wall.
Yeah, with the spacing in between.
Yeah.
Yeah, that might make more sense to make sure that that lawn stays to converted plantings and such. So I'd be on board with that. And then just if Bob could just clarify, I mean, in terms of impacts to the wetland, I mean, obviously the disturbance of taking the wall out and moving it is going to have an impact, of course. But I mean, are we really getting any benefits to the wetland by moving that wall back in the long term that can be identified?
In my opinion, no, except as you say, if the plantings in that area get torn out and the lawn goes back where we had the agency had previously been given this planting plan and we expected to see it fully implemented.
How about a split rail fence?
That's very impermanent.
That's very, yeah,
Either large boulders or, as Pat suggested, the wall sections would be appropriate.
Doreen will remember, is it Birch Lane where we, the agency approved low segmented stone wall? Remember that one, Doreen?
To think about that.
The lovely woman, they were divorcing. It was not pleasant. And the lawn just kept creeping back and planting plans kept going away. But in the end, Tony, did stone wall on that one? Did you plan that one out?
No, that was Tony Fulton.
Tony Fulton.
I'm familiar with that now. Yeah, that was a very nice stone wall demarcation feature.
If that's more protective than the boulders, that would be my preference.
Okay. Is that okay, Mr. Hegney?
I think that could benefit the agency's concerns and also provide an aesthetic or enhanced look of the property, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And I might say that the segmented stone wall sort of behind the house along that line, and then as you get further to the south, maybe transition to big boulders, a more naturalized look, because those are larger trees back there.
And dense, if I may. That's a dense orchard or planting area as you move south along the eastern wall.
Well, is the planting plan to come to us for final approval?
The planting plan that I sent to you highlighted in yellow around the area to be completed, that was the one that was approved in 2019. Mr. DeAndrea's crosshatched area is going to, a quick count, it looks like about eight or nine trees with shrubs and meadow underneath, which then would transition to that area that's already been planted to the east of the easterly wall, to the south of the crosshatched area. Those are just large shade trees.
Okay, so you would have then the segmented stone wall for the, along the eastern part of the proposed planting envelope to transition and fade into the planted forest area to the south. Does that capture what you're saying, Bob?
Yes.
Okay. Somebody want to make a motion on this one? All right. I'll move that we issue an order to correct with paragraph 4B rather than 4A.
And the additional condition with regards to the stone wall at the perimeter of the segmented stone wall at the perimeter of the planted area to fade into the shade trees to the south.
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Excellent.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Seconded.
Peter.
Peter got in there first.
Okay, roll call. Peter.
Yes.
Elliot.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
Norma.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Order to correct issued 500 with condition 4B and a wall to outline the planted area fading into the woods.
2020-091, 6
Thank you
Willow
very
Road.
much.
I'm sorry.
I said, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, 2020-091, 6 Willow Run Road. Soundview Engineers and Land Surveyors for Joseph Lamberti for construction of a single-family residence, etc.
Okay, Bob Clossy with the staff report. This, on the face of it, is a very straightforward redevelopment proposal on this 1 acre parcel. And interestingly, the slope here, you would maybe, we would generally see the slope of the property heading toward this watercourse at the northern end of the site. But this is the side of a drumlin, and the slope is actually to the east, or the top of the plan on that Doreen is showing. So, you know, there's some advantages to that. A little less pressure on the wetland watercourse corridor, you know, if they're able to install that eastern retaining wall early in the process, that will even further reduce, you know, any potential erosion control failure that might allow sediment to cross the neighboring property and then head down the slope to the north. Let's see, they have a drainage system, infiltrators, porous asphalt, and the drainage summary report says that the system will reduce peak rates and volumes through the 100-year storm. There has been a review by DPW. They've asked for some revisions. Those revisions will not be, have not been submitted yet. And so that's one reason I'm recommending delay. We do need to know where the water well is going to be drilled. This is a property, even 1 acre property, it's got a well. So that's pretty important to know. And as I noted here, rather than show 35 and 50 foot quote unquote setbacks, the 100-foot upland review area line should be added to the any revision to this plan that we see either prior to approval or as a final construction plan. Now, the other reason to delay this is I don't know what happened here, but there's the whole southern bank of this watercourse. It's a steep slope, and just behind that line of trees and in the trees, there's tons of logs, cut branches, construction debris. I have asked for an explanation of what happened here. I mean, did they bring stuff onto the property? Was this all from the property? We need a plan for all of this material to be removed and the area restored. And I would also suggest to the agency that it might consider requiring a wider buffer, which would push the buffer beyond that line of trees, push it to the south so that you're up on the level portion of the property, not right at the edge of this steep embankment, which would, I believe, would provide better protection for the watercourse in the future. So the applicant got this staff report, has been, as soon as I went out there and saw the debris, I sent Mr. Zmarzlak an email. So they've known about this for a couple of weeks, and I recommend the agency delay.
Thank you. Do we have anybody for the applicant?
Mr. Zmarzlak has been promoted to panelist.
Yes, hi, Robert Zmarzlak, Soundview Engineers. We're in the process of revising the drainage report, and we should be handing that in this week, by the end of the week. Doesn't really change any of the drainage, might change a little bit of the grading, but pretty much stays the same as you see it. The well is going to be the existing well, which is in the front yard, kind of like in the near the road. So they're going to use the current well. I think it's in that blue. It's in the blue handwriting there. And as far as the logs go on the embankment, I really haven't gotten an answer on that. I'm not sure he knows where those are or what, but I can't really attest to that yet. But he would be in favor of doing a planting plan to increase that buffer somewhat. I don't think he'd have a problem with that. What else was there? We could revise the 100-foot setback lines. That's about it.
Okay, do we have any agency comments or questions? Any public comments or questions?
I'm seeing none.
Very good. Then I suggest we delay this application for the next meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Very good. 2020-092, 40 Locust Road.
Jen Urena will be presenting this one.
Hi, Jen Urena with the staff report. So this is a walking path around a pond on 40 Locust Road within wetland areas. It is a flat area, approximately 6 feet from the water's edge, and it will be about 3 inches in width. As described in the project narrative, the path will be recessed using 3/4 washed gravel based on top of a filter fabric. A 1-inch thick layer of 3/8 decorative pea gravel will be placed on top. The path will be roughly 6 feet from the water's edge. The location of the proposed walking path surrounding the man-made pond is virtually level wetland and pasture. There are a few trees along the edge of the pond. As part of the earlier permit and declaratory ruling, there are 2 horse paddocks and a riding ring surrounding the pond. There is also meadow surrounding about 1/4 of the pond. The pond is dependent primarily on groundwater and has a low turnover rate. A prudent alternative to the recessed path would be a raised pathway, which would have a lesser short and long-term impacts. A pathway of gravel and pea stone, even with the filter fabric liner, is apt to support weeds in just a short growing season, and weed killer may be used to manage this. Further, the pea stone will have to be replenished periodically, requiring access to move in the stone. A ground level boardwalk may be an alternative worth exploring. It would eliminate short-term disturbance to excavate the path and long-term maintenance cited above. If the proposed path is approved, the following recommendations should be considered. The pathway could be shifted away from the pond, closer to the paddocks. This would effectively preserve a wider vegetative buffer around the pond's edge. And also all conditions of their 2017 permit, including the horse management plan, will remain in effect. In your packet, you will find the biological narrative supplied by Bill Kenny and Carolyn Matthews. The report concludes the path will not adversely affect the wetland in the long term. Should the applicant respond to the outstanding questions to the satisfaction of the agency, I did provide conditions of approval, and I was informed by Mr. Chang that Bill Kenny will be speaking on behalf of the applicant, of himself tonight. So is Bill on the call?
I don't see him in the attendees list.
Okay, because I know he's on before.
Was.
Yeah, he did let me know, and I saw Bill's response that he would be speaking. But you do have that biological narrative. I guess I could speak to it a bit. I did read it over. They did state, you know, long term, they would be pulling the weeds by hand. They have stated that they would not be using weed killer. I guess I could pull that up a bit, but that is odd because he did say he was speaking on his behalf. But, you know, should the agency find that the pathway proposed could be approved, there are conditions.
Thank you. And Bill Kenny has disappeared on us, I take it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I will say, I'll speak one more time. You know, the applicant didn't send me an email, and Bill was going to speak on his behalf, but he did, you know, state that they are around 7 years old. They plan on obviously staying at their current residence. They're saying that there is slippery grass and around the pond edge, and they like to walk it. I've been visiting this site since I started, and they have complied to all of their 2017 permit conditions. It would be a bit hard pulling it back closer to the paddocks. It could be possible in certain areas, certainly, and they would have to provide the distances from the pond's edge so that we can see that to provide that larger vegetative buffer. But again, they didn't provide that alternative, so I did give a prudent alternative within my staff report.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have anything but Bill's office number, so.
Okay.
I just sent him a text. I don't know whether we want to move on.
And see if he shows up. Oh, you're muted, Bob. Oh,
Yeah,
there you go.
good. Yes, exactly.
Well, why don't we put this to the side till we're ready to close up, and then we'll see if he shows up. Okay. How many applications do we have to receive at this point?
We have 18.
Woo.
I know. Like I said, things are kicking out there.
Yeah, and here's Mr. Grunberg again, first up.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, I move we receive applications 1 through 18. Have a second?
I'm a second.
Okay, roll call. Elliot.
Yep.
Norma.
Yes.
Klaus.
Yes.
Jay.
Yes.
And Peter.
Yes.
Okay, 500 to accept.
Okay, any questions or comments on the agent approval permits? Okay, violations.
Oh, hang on, John Conti is raising his hand here.
He is representing the owners on this
Ah,
violation.
okay, great. And I see Emrola also in our attendees, so,
I believe that's a neighbor.
oh, okay.
So staff had received multiple complaints by concerned neighbors in August 9th and 10th regarding the removal of large trees adjacent to the pond located at 34 Baldwin Farms North. A field inspection found that several large trees ranging between 20 and 24 inches in diameter and several smaller woody shrubs or woody stumps were removed within the 100-foot upland review area. No tree work was occurring at the time of the inspection, so it's unknown who was the contractor doing the work. A week prior, staff received a call from a real estate agent wanting to know what was the requirement to remove trees along the edge of the pond, since it was contingent upon the sale of the property. She was told that clearing of vegetation for this purpose was not typically allowed and that a permit would need to be put in place before any activity could occur. The real estate agent then stated that she would have the owner contact the agency directly. So let's see. So the agent for the homeowner, John Conte, spoke with me today and let me know that the inquiry for the tree removal was directed to the property to the northeast of the site and was unrelated to this tree cutting that occurred. However, this homeowner has had several wetland permits and is aware of the wetland conditions, and so therefore I think that they should be issued a municipal fine. A stop work order was issued to the owner on August 10th by certified and regular mail. Cease and correct order 2020-06 was issued by regular and certified mail on August 17th with a deadline for an application to be submitted by September 21st, 2020. Staff's recommending that the agency maintain the cease and correct order and place a certificate of violation on the land records if the corrective application isn't submitted by the September 21st, 2020 deadline. It's also recommended to issue a $1,000 municipal fine to the property owner.
Excuse me, Doreen, did you cover all the documents?
Yes, stop work order and cease and correct order.
Okay, so through your text, you've listed all the documents that are part of the record?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Doreen. Mr. Conti, are you representing the applicant here, the violator?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I was contacted after the applicant received the stop work order and asked to represent that that they have retained myself and SE Minor Company to fully address this issue and to respond fully to all of the issues. I appreciate Doreen clarifying that it does seem that the timing of the realtor's request to remove trees and then the storm that followed, which was the reason for the tree removals, was an unfortunate timing because it appeared that the landowner just went forward after the staff, told them not to. But that was, from what I understand, a completely unrelated event and just an unfortunate timing. There are actually two properties that are both under the name 34 Baldwin Farms. It's a split property. One is for sale, one is under construction. My understanding is that following Hurricane Isaias, 3 of the tall pine trees, and I have a photograph that shows that one of the trees, in fact, split so that there was a double fork very high up in the tree, and when it split, it left a very, very dangerous half tree. So the owner, actually, Mike Rollo, is, I believe, on the call and may actually want to say a few words on his own, because the way it was described to me is that after the storm, the trees were badly broken and dangerous, he immediately called his landscape crew and they arranged to have the trees removed for safety reasons. So this was not in defiance of a wetland order. And in fact, even though that they do have wetlands applications, this was the response to tree damage after a storm. And so they were simply trying to address that safety concern. That being said, we will put together a mitigation plan. I visited the site. I personally was looking for the tree removals and I saw 3 stumps. They look like pine stumps in the range of maybe 14 to 18 inch. These were not huge. They were tall, skinny trees from the photo that I saw. I didn't see grubbing, ground clearing, or underbrush removal in the area that I looked. So I'm not really sure what that referred to, but in my view, it looked like 3 trees were cut down in response to storm damage. I've spoken to the owner. They're more than willing to respond in the way that is needed. And they are more than willing to have us put together a nice planting plan for that area. I would like you to consider, after hearing Mr. Rollo, who would like to speak, removing the municipal fine as, again, he was simply trying to do his diligence on keeping workers on the site safe. And, I don't feel that this was a deliberate defiance in any way, shape, or form. So I'd like to perhaps hear from him so that he can tell you that in his own voice. And I'd also like to please request that between now and September meeting, we will submit a plan, but we'd hopefully that you will lift the stop work order so that the work on the house, which is under construction, can continue.
Thank you.
Mr. Rolla been promoted to panelist.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I believe I'm off mute. Yeah, so just to speak to what John said as well, I mean, obviously when the storm came through, I just naturally took care of trees that were safety concerns in my eyes. Even when I went over to the property to begin with, there was a tree down in the road and neighbors were trying to get by, and just naturally we all helped and moved the tree out of the way and got some saws out and cut them up. So I just, again, just naturally assumed that since they were on my land, I could just take care of them. And because they were a safety hazard to everyone, that it wouldn't be an issue. And, obviously I'm a little bit younger and, I guess not really certain about all of this process, but, I really do love the neighborhood. I love the woodsiness area, and, this really didn't benefit me in any way, it cost me for tree removal and no view has changed of mine whatsoever. I'd like to do, I guess, whatever's necessary to reconcile this, but, moving forward, I love all the bush around it, and I plan to protect the wetlands as much as possible.
Thank you. Okay, so as I understand it, you're representing that these trees were either felled by or damaged by Isaias, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Doreen, is that consistent with what you observed on site?
There was one location on the western side of the site where I saw a broken pine tree as well that fell on the smaller group of stumps. But I can't speak to the larger trees to have been broken. And so I didn't see that part, I can't say.
The only problem I have is the timing. Isaias was on the 4th, but the trees are being chopped down now on the 9th and 10th.
Yeah, that's I guess another one of my concerns. I mean, I had the landscapes out there on the 6th. So, I mean, obviously with all this things going on, I got them out there as soon as possible, but they were completed on the 6th. There was no tree work of any sort being done on the 9th and 10th.
That's not true.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're going to be muted, Ms. Yablon. You'll be given an opportunity to speak.
Okay, we have a little little conflict here.
So, Elliot, when you're ready to call on public comment, I'll unmute.
Very
Ms.
good. Do we have any comments, questions, or comments from the agency, please? No comments from the agency. Now we can have the public comment.
Ms. Yablon, you can unmute yourself.
And please identify yourself for the record.
Yes, my name's Pamela Gallen Yablon. I'm on 33 Bolden Farm South. I'm directly across, I'm on the angle across the pond. I'm also representing Jill Botway and John Kramer, who are directly across from this property. Very specifically, early in May, I spoke to, because I was walking that way, the head GC said to me explicitly that no additional trees were going to be taken down, that they were aware of it. No trees around the perimeter of this lovely pond were damaged in the storm. Let me finish. And very specifically, I went over after I heard a great deal of noise from cutting up trees. And one day my view was severely compromised. And in 3 locations, I saw the house, and I went over and I spoke to the very nice gardeners who were there. There was 1 tree on the border of the adjacent property to the west, where 1 little tree branch was taken down. I contend and reject everything that was just said explicitly, and I took some pictures which I sent to Doreen. The stumps, I'm a surgeon, I can measure. The stumps were approximately 3 feet in diameter. The canopies of each of these very large trees were substantial enough that from my property across the pond, I could now see the house, and the Botway Kramers now have a direct view into the house. In addition, Doreen kindly, after I notified her, put a stop work order in. Work was continued on the house. I asked Doreen, she said no, it pertained to the wetlands. And that's next Saturday, I heard and saw people cutting down brush on the north side. They were trimming the brush, so now I have another view of the house that I didn't have after they cut down the large trees. The Botway Kramers and myself are extremely dismayed because this really was a pristine setting where we didn't see each other's houses except in the winter. I understand that they were probably dismayed that they couldn't see the pond in the summer. Now they see my red umbrellas. But the fact is, we would like very much for them to replace the trees with exceedingly large ones, plug the hole in the wetlands area. These trees were not damaged as best I could see, and I was out there every day grounded by the lack of electricity because I have a direct view. And this was under the guise of the storm that in fact, they took down the trees so that they got a partial view. But to compound things, their people were cutting and trimming the brush at the edge to give them an additional view. My housekeeper can contend to this. So respectfully, you are the individuals to whom we can complain. And they really ruined something very beautiful for many of us on the other side of the pond. Please, I don't know where to put this in, so I'll just mention it. Would you consider at some point that when you give notification of construction, because there was a project and immediately adjacent, that people on the other side of the pond are also notified when you have your internal conversations? I'd ask that you make that consideration in addition to notifying adjacent people. But very specifically, a $1,000 fine, which is probably the limits of what you can do, is de minimis for this family. And we really just want the trees replaced and the holes plugged. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Ms. Yablon, can you tell me which day you actually heard or saw the trees being removed?
Well, it wasn't apparent. There was so much buzzing around because there were trees down in my street, but they were all cleared within 24 hours. There were, of course, trees on Bolden Farms north the road. I heard it on, the storm was Tuesday, I believe. I heard it at the end of the week, and really, I didn't realize what was going on until all of a sudden I could see the house in 2 different places. I called the Botways, and their view was destroyed, frankly. They're directly across. I'm on an angle. I'm southwest, depending on how the crow flies. And then again, the next Saturday, and this is documented in emails I sent to Doreen, there was construction during the week. There was construction on the house. They did not stop. but very specifically, I saw a workman lowering the grass at the edge of the pond. And now I have another view of the house that I didn't have before. And I went over there, and at that point, they were gone. But initially, when I went over, I spoke to the landscaper, if you would, and he showed me the tree. He showed me the tree stumps, and then he showed me one little branch on the south end that had come down in the storm. But it was 90 degrees to the very large trees with these huge canopies, which is really a travesty that they took down to give themselves a view. The reason I bought this house was, frankly, I'm an expat from New York, but I'm a seer, I'm not a newcomer, a brand newcomer, was specifically because of the view from my house.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I may. Mr. Rolla, do you have photographs of the damaged trees, a report to the insurance company of the cost for the trees, or the written estimate from the entity who did the tree work to substantiate your description?
Yeah, we could provide photos that we took of the damaged trees. I mean, I'm surely we must be mistaken for another neighbor, as we've never touched anything near the water. And I mean, frankly, I mean, can we provide dates that this work was being done? As I said, the tree work was done on the 6th. Everything was being filed on the 9th and 10th. I mean, there's significant time difference here. I must be mistaken for another property.
The estimate, photos, claim to the insurance company, any of those things would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, there was no claim to the insurance company, and there was no estimate, because these are just the guys that work for us, and just they're our gardeners, so they just added to the bill for tree work.
Right, did they date that?
I could provide an invoice.
Dated,
Sure.
if that's the best we can do.
Yeah, the pictures would be helpful too.
Yeah, there would be no insurance claim because there was no damage to a dwelling.
Correct. I could provide photos as well, not a problem.
Okay. So I think perhaps we should defer the question of the fine until we get some more data.
Yeah, you can continue the hearing if you'd like.
I would like. Anybody on the agency have comment? Question?
My only comment is, even if there's no damage to the house, and a lot of homeowners insurances, there is insurance, but the deductible is somewhere usually $2,000 deductible, or $5,000. In my case, it's $2,000. So there might be insurance depending on what the bill is.
Generally, the insurance for wind damage doesn't cover damaged trees and plantings. It will cover, and I know this from experience, because we had a tree come down and punch 3 holes in the roof. So
the roof is covered.
I've had the experience too, also in this storm, because we had 2 or 3 trees come down right over our driveway, and we had to get them removed.
Yeah. Okay, I would defer this one until we get some more information.
So we'll continue this hearing to our September meeting.
If that's okay with the rest of the agency.
Yes.
Now, the house is under construction, and obviously the owner is very eager to keep that going. Understanding that the order for repair and everything needs to happen, and that no work should happen down on the landscape near the lake, but may they continue working on the house, which does not include anything near that lake edge.
Well, was there any work performed between the 10th and the, I'm sorry, between the 17th? Yeah, stop work order on the 10th. Between the 10th and today?
I can't answer that. Perhaps.
So most of the work on the house is located outside the 100-foot upland review area?
Well,
correct.
Does a stop work order only refer to work within the review area?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so it doesn't apply to the house.
Okay, that's fine then. I mean, the work is, occurring on the house. The work along the hill in the back would not be something we would want to proceed to unless we provided you with a plan showing you what we're going to do and had your approval to do it.
Okay.
So you can, John, you and Mr. Rolla, while we wait for additional information for September, if you have a sense of the way that this is going anyway, and you want to submit a corrective action application to get on the September for review in October, you can go ahead and do that.
Right. Yes. I mean, from everything that I've been told from the client, that I have no reason to disbelieve him. Ms. Yablon's testimony was completely news to anything I heard. So from my understanding, this was a response to storm damage, and they're more than happy to plant trees or, shrubbery to restore, some lost canopy. So I will move in that direction, and the Rollas will try to provide some dates and some photographic evidence of their to corroborate their story. Okay.
Very good.
Very good. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Okay,
tonight.
I saw that Bill Kenny reappeared.
Yes, he did.
Okay, we're out.
Okay.
Okay, back to 40 Locust Road.
Okay, Bill should be joining us.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Yes, thank you very much for
Bill, we really missed you.
too much going on.
So Jen provided an overview of the proposal, her staff report, the alternatives. So if you want to jump in from there, probably with the alternatives, if you've got any thoughts on those.
Sure. And I saw in the staff report that I have, I'm not sure if there's one more recent. Oh, this is from August 7th. An alternative was proposed as a boardwalk at grade. Is that correct?
Jen?
Yes, that's correct. And then I know you supplied the biological narrative after the staff report. So Mr. Chang told me you would speak to that a bit. It did conclude that it would not adversely affect the wetlands. So we wanted to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. And the property, the wetland on this property has been actively used as a horse farm for many, many decades. And so there's a shallow layer of fill throughout much of the wetland area on the property, maybe about a foot deep. And the pond in the middle is man-made. These were all improvements done decades ago as part of the farm establishment. And the current owner purchased the property, I believe, around 2012, and did a lot of maintenance and upgrades to the infrastructure, including the barn and the greenhouse and paddock areas and so forth, and obtained approvals with you. So he and the owners are 70, and they'd like to stay here the rest of their life, and they love to take walks around the pond and enjoy the pond. And so they're proposing this very minimal walkway. It's only 30 inches wide, and 3 inches of gravel with a filter fabric below it to keep it from getting pushed into the soil. And they have agreed to control the growth of vegetation in the gravel with either pulling by hand or cutting with like a string line trimmer. And So based on that, it's our opinion, and based on the way the walkway is laid out, that this, in keeping within the context of this farm activity, will not adversely affect the wetlands based on their current condition that is out there. So I appreciate the alternative of a boardwalk, but I don't, in my opinion, it's not warranted based on what the owner would like to do and how they propose to maintain this pathway.
Okay, thank you. Are there any agency comments or questions? Any public comments or questions? Is there any public left?
Dan.
Dan, okay.
Dan the man.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve as is.
Jay, I'll second.
Okay, Norma?
Yes.
Klaus?
Yes, approved.
Peter?
Yes.
Elliot?
Yep.
Jay?
Yes.
500.
Thanks for sticking around, Bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for finding me, tracking me down. Have a good night.
Okay, last item is other business. 62 Bedford Road. Determination required for a permit, whether this is going to be an as of right or application required.
Jennifer Urano? Jen, did you want to take this?
Yeah, I'll go ahead. Did I unmute myself? Sorry, just checking.
You are unmuted.
So this is a determination request. Steve McMenamin, owner of Versailles Farm, has been before the agency before for an as-of-right determination associated with his shiitake mushroom farming. Mr. McMenamin is presently looking for a determination if he needs a permit to temporarily store materials related to the deconstructed access way in a wetland. So a bit of background: as part of an adverse possession ruling against Steve McMenamin, he was granted access to the rear of his property via temporary access. It was an elevated access way constructed of wood planking spanning gabions set on the ground. The court ruled that this did not constitute as temporary means, and Mr. McMenamin was ordered to remove the material. The access way was dismantled and placed in the wetlands on an adjoining parcel with the owner's permission, and that adjoining parcel is 62 Bedford Road. Steve McMenamin would like to temporarily store material currently within the wetland areas of 62 Bedford. The material consists of the logs stacked on pallets and the gabions formerly used within the easement of 40 Locusts. Mr. McMenamin has an agricultural exemption for 56 Locust Road and informed the department that this material will eventually be used for this purpose. Mr. McMenamin would like to store the material until the winter months, at which time he would move the material to a permanent location on the adjacent property off of King Street, and he is in the process of acquiring this property. He would seek a permit for this permanent location as appropriate. Steve states that if he were to move the material from its current location now, it would cause him to move it twice and cause rutting within the wetland, whereas if he were able to move it in the winter months, there would be less of a disturbance and he would be able to move the material to its intended, more permanent location. Section 4 of the regulation specifically articulates activities that are as of right in connection to farming. Storage of material in wetlands is not one of them, and I reread that many times. The next question is how long the current situation can persist before it's considered a deposition of material in a wetland and needs a permit. And that's all I have.
So why is this not a violation?
So it is storage of material, and he is stating that it would be moved. We did let him know that he would have to obtain a permit if he'd like to maintain it, but he challenged that a bit due to the fact he has an as of right agricultural exemption for 56 Bedford Road, and it is just beyond that on 62. I don't think if you pull up 40 Locust, although it's affiliated, you'll see it on the map, but it is part of the agriculture exemption. So he's asking if the storage of material just beyond his property would still require that permit. Would he be able to leave the material until its more permanent location off of King Street after the winter months? Would be a possibility.
I'm looking at 4. I don't see that storage is as of right.
And neither do I. I think that's.
Bob's got something to add?
I just have a question and 2 questions. The temporary, well, what Mr. McMenamin installed to create what he thought was his temporary access road, that temporary road was needed for him to go from his house site basically on Locust Road to the back of his property, which is landlocked. Is that correct? And does he do agricultural activities on that part of his property?
Yes, he does. And that is not needed right now because it's the summer and he can cross it easily. And that was also deemed by the courts not temporary in nature. So he literally moved it a few feet over onto 60 Bedford with the intention of then moving it to King Street in the future months that he's looking to acquire, pretty much for the same thing as an access way. And he would take out a permit or seek a permit for that permanent location at the appropriate time. But because I don't see storage of material within a wetland within Section 4, and he is questioning whether more temporary in nature of storage of material would be allowed without a permit due to the fact that there is a intention there.
All right, so basically the road was part of his agricultural activity when it was in place because he had to get to that part of his property.
Yes.
The court told him to remove it. He moved it, and he's asking for permission to maintain it temporarily till the winter when he won't rot up the place. So the second question is, the place he put it, did that require removal of vegetation or any sort of ancillary impact to the wetland besides the fact that it was just sitting on the wetland?
It is just sitting there. I would say there is a good canopy over it, so I do not believe there were significant trees removed, perhaps a bit of vegetation. As Mr. Kenny has said, 40 Locust, 62 Bedford, 56 Bedford, there's a great number of years of fill being established there, so it's not the best wetland area. So no, I don't believe there were any large trees removed.
So if he configured this material in an access way type configuration, he could keep it because it's an access way for farming. That's as of right. But because it was dismantled and no longer has that function, it's literally the same material.
It is.
But now it's lost its structure, so it's material, not an access way. Kind of.
Hello. I had this huge tree that came down on my property. It's all cut up. If I took it and stacked it in the buffer area, I'm just going to burn it. It's only going to be there temporarily. You'd have my neck.
I know. We may be.
I think he's got to get it out of the wetland. I don't care what he does with it. He's just got to get it out of the wetland. Am I wrong here?
The reason we brought this forward is because we had some, what do you do with this one? So we kicked it on to you guys. Kicked it forward. My pleasure.
Well, personally, I think he needs to get it out of the wetland. And he needs to get it out of the wetland now. Okay. What do the rest of you folks think? Norma, Jay, Peter, Klaus?
Yeah, I think he should get it out. I don't think he should necessarily get a fine for having put it there temporarily, to let him get it out of there.
Okay.
This is Norma. I agree with Jay.
Klaus, Peter, where are you guys?
Yeah, okay, let them get it out, no fine.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. Also, looking at the pictures, and it doesn't look like it was very damaging to the area, but yeah, I think staff should advise him to get it out.
Yeah, I think just the very fact of the you're not quite setting a precedent, which we often say, but just letting somebody dump stuff in the wetland because he's going to remove it later is not something that I think we want to allow. Okay.
What was his concern again? I have the document in front of me. What did he say? That he didn't want to move it twice because of he felt it was actually going to be detrimental to the wetland to move it?
Yeah, and because although he has that agriculture exemption for 56, all of that borders so closely 62 and 40 locusts, and he was wondering the difference between temporary nature versus long-term storage, and we just thought best to just put it before the agency. Initially, I did say he would have to seek a permit if he'd like to maintain it in its location, or he'd have to remove it. But then further discussion with him, we felt it would be best to leave this determination request up to you.
Yeah, hopefully he's not correct and it doesn't actually cause a big disturbance to get the stuff out of there.
And well, that wetland gets messed around with quite a bit, so.
Well,
well, the two times of the year that it would be best to move it is the winter when the ground is frozen and late summer when the ground is hard.
Yeah.
Which is now.
Right.
So let's get it out. And by the way, if he wants to move it to 52 or wherever he has the exemption and it's still in a wetland, it's still not acceptable.
The exemption doesn't apply.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Do we
you.
have anything else to discuss?
Not.
Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 9:59.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Bye all.